I was standing in my kitchen, looking out at my beautiful ranch pool that I had worked 15 years to build, when I heard the sirens. 3 police cars were pulling into my driveway. My heart pounded as I watched Karen march toward my front door with a smug smile on her face. "Officers, this man has been violating court orders for months," she declared, pointing directly at me through the window. "He refuses to comply with HOA regulations." The problem was, there were no court orders. There never had been. Karen had just made the biggest mistake of her life, and she had no idea what she had just unleashed. As I opened the door to face the officers, I realized this moment would either destroy everything I had built, or it would finally expose the truth about what Karen had been doing to our entire neighborhood. What happened next changed everything. My name is David, and for the past 15 years, I had been living what I thought was the American dream. My ranch sat on 12 acres of rolling hills just outside of Cedar Creek, Texas. Every morning, I would wake up to the sound of birds chirping and the sight of endless blue sky stretching over my property. The centerpiece of everything I had built was my custom pool. It was not just any pool. I had designed it myself, worked with contractors for 8 months, and invested over $40,000 to make it perfect. The infinity edge seemed to blend right into the horizon. Native Texas limestone surrounded the entire area, and I had planted desert willows and Mexican buckeyes to create natural shade. This pool was where my family gathered every summer. My grandchildren learned to swim in those crystal-clear waters. My wife and I hosted barbecues where neighbors would come together, sharing stories and building friendships that lasted for years. The pool represented everything good about small-town living and the rewards of hard work. I had followed every rule, obtained every permit, and paid every fee required by the county. The pool was set back more than 50 feet from any property line, completely private and perfectly legal. I was proud of what I had accomplished, and I had every right to be. For 14 years, life was peaceful. The homeowners association had been formed when the neighborhood was first developed, but it was mostly dormant. We had a small annual fee for maintaining the entrance road, and that was about it. Most of us preferred it that way. We were country people who valued privacy and independence. Then Karen moved in. Karen Martinez had purchased the house 3 lots down from mine about 6 months earlier. She was a retired government administrator from Austin who seemed to have nothing but time on her hands. Within 2 months of moving in, she had gotten herself elected to the HOA board. Within 3 months, she was the board president. I first noticed her driving slowly past my property almost every morning. She would slow down near my gate, crane her neck to look toward my house, and sometimes even stop her car completely. At first, I thought she was just admiring the landscaping. I had spent years perfecting the native plant gardens that lined my driveway. But then I realized she was taking notes. I was working in my garden one morning when she pulled up to my gate and rolled down her window. "Excuse me," she called out. "I am Karen Martinez, the new HOA president. I need to schedule an inspection of your property." I walked over to her car, wiping dirt off my hands. "An inspection? We have never had property inspections before." "Well, things are different now," she said with a tight smile. "There have been complaints about violations, and I need to document everything properly." I had been living in this neighborhood longer than almost anyone. I could not imagine who would be complaining about my property. But I wanted to be neighborly, so I agreed to let her look around. That was my first mistake. Karen showed up the next Tuesday morning at exactly 9 o'clock, carrying a clipboard, a measuring tape, and a camera. She was wearing a business suit like she was conducting some kind of official government inspection. "I need to check fence heights, setbacks, and landscaping compliance," she announced as she marched onto my property without waiting for permission. I followed her around, growing more confused by the minute. She measured the height of my mailbox post. She took pictures of my garden fence. She wrote down notes about the color of my house trim. Everything she was documenting seemed completely normal and reasonable. Then she saw the pool. "This is a problem," she said, pointing toward the pool area. "This structure is clearly visible from the road." "Barely," I replied. "You can only see a small section through the trees, and only if you are really looking for it. The HOA covenants clearly state that recreational structures must not be visible from public areas," she said, scribbling furiously on her clipboard. I had read those covenants when I first moved in. They were vague and mostly focused on preventing people from parking boats or RVs in their front yards. There was nothing specific about pools, and certainly nothing that would apply to my situation. "Karen, I have had this pool for 14 years. If there was a problem, someone would have mentioned it by now. Previous HOA boards were clearly not doing their jobs," she replied coldly. "I am here to enforce the rules properly." 3 days later, I received my first official violation notice in the mail. It was typed on official HOA letterhead and demanded that I take immediate action to screen pool area from public view or face escalating fines and legal action. The letter gave me 30 days to comply. I called my neighbor Tom, who had been living in the area even longer than I had. "Tom, have you gotten any strange letters from the HOA lately?" "Oh, you got one too," he laughed bitterly. "Karen cited me for having the wrong color gravel in my driveway. Apparently, it should be beige instead of gray. I have had the same gravel for 12 years. Over the next week, I discovered that Karen had sent violation notices to at least 8 different homeowners. Mrs. Peterson was cited for having too many flower pots on her front porch. The Johnsons were told their vegetable garden was not in compliance with landscaping standards. Even old Mr. Williams, who was 83 years old, got a letter about his bird feeders being improperly placed. I decided to try reasoning with Karen directly. I called the number on the letterhead and asked if we could meet to discuss the pool situation. "There is nothing to discuss," she said. "You have 25 days left to comply." "Karen, I am willing to plant some additional trees if visibility is really the concern. Could we work together on a reasonable solution?" "The rules are the rules, David. I do not make exceptions." "What if I showed you the original permits and county approvals? Everything was done legally." "County permits do not override HOA covenants," she replied. "You have 25 days. She hung up. That evening, I sat on my back porch looking at the pool that had brought my family so much joy over the years. The water was perfectly clear, reflecting the stars that were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. My wife Sarah joined me with 2 cups of coffee. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I do not know yet," I admitted, "but something about this whole situation does not feel right." I had no idea how right I was. 2 weeks later, Karen escalated her campaign. She showed up at my door on a Saturday morning with another official-looking document. "This is your final notice," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. "You have failed to take adequate action to address the pool visibility violation." I looked at the document. It was even more formal than the first letter, with legal language about immediate compliance required and escalating daily fines of $50 beginning Monday. "Karen, I planted 6 new trees along the road. You can barely see the pool anymore." "It is still visible," she replied. "The covenant requires complete screening from all public areas." "Show me exactly where in the covenants it says that." She pulled out a binder thick with papers. Section 423 clearly states that recreational structures and improvements must not detract from the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood when viewed from common areas. I read the section she was pointing to. The language was vague and could be interpreted many different ways. This does not specifically mention pools, and it certainly does not require complete invisibility. "That is my interpretation as HOA president, and it is final," she said. "You have until Monday to permanently close the pool area or face daily fines that will continue until you comply." "Permanently close it. Karen, this pool cost me $40,000. My family has used it for 14 years. "That is not my concern," she replied with a shrug. "You should have considered HOA requirements before building." After she left, I was furious. I called my attorney, Jim Patterson, who had handled the original permits and legal work when I built the pool. "Jim, I need your help. The HOA is trying to force me to close my pool permanently." "On what grounds?" he asked. I explained the situation and read him the covenant language Karen was citing. "David, that language is so vague it would never hold up in court. And more importantly, I need to check something. When was your pool built in relation to when the HOA was formed?" "The pool was finished in 2009. Why does that matter?" "It matters because I think the HOA was not even legally established until 2011. If that is true, they cannot retroactively enforce restrictions on improvements made before their authority existed." My heart started beating faster. "Are you saying they might not have any legal authority over my pool at all?" "That is exactly what I am saying. Give me a few days to research this properly." While Jim was researching, I made a decision that felt like surrendering but was actually strategic. I called Karen and told her I would temporarily close the pool while we worked out the legal details. "Finally," she said with satisfaction in her voice, "I knew you would see reason eventually." I put a cover over the pool and posted a sign saying it was closed for maintenance. It killed me to do it, but I needed time to build my case properly. Karen drove by that same evening to confirm the pool was covered. I watched from my window as she took pictures and made notes. She was practically gloating. Over the next few days, I learned just how much Karen was enjoying her newfound power. She started hosting neighborhood meetings at her house, calling them HOA compliance workshops. According to Tom, she spent most of these meetings talking about how she had successfully forced me to close my pool. "She told everyone that you were the first example of what happens when people think they can ignore HOA authority," Tom reported. "She is planning to go after everyone else next." But Karen had made a crucial mistake. Her overconfidence was making her sloppy. She was documenting everything she did, keeping detailed records of her enforcement actions, and most importantly, she was expanding her claims about what authority she actually had. Jim called me on Thursday with news that changed everything. "David, you are not going to believe what I found. The HOA was not legally established until 2011, which means they have no authority over your pool. But that is not even the biggest problem." "What do you mean?" "I mean Karen has been operating completely outside any legitimate authority. The current HOA board was never properly elected, the bylaws were never filed with the county, and most of the fees she has been collecting are illegal." "How is that possible?" "It appears the previous board let everything lapse years ago. Karen has been essentially playing pretend government with no actual legal backing. I felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that my pool was safe, and anger that Karen had put my family through weeks of stress over nothing. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We document everything and let Karen keep digging her own hole," Jim replied. "Something tells me she is not done making mistakes." He was right. Armed with Jim's research, I began building a comprehensive case against Karen's abuse of power, but I decided not to confront her directly yet. Instead, I wanted to let her continue operating under the false belief that she had legitimate authority. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly gathered evidence. I obtained copies of all county records related to the HOA formation and dissolution. I documented every violation notice Karen had sent to neighbors. I photographed the signs she had posted around the neighborhood claiming various rules and restrictions. Most importantly, I started recording all my interactions with Karen. She made this easy by becoming increasingly bold and aggressive. With the pool covered, she apparently felt emboldened to expand her enforcement efforts throughout the neighborhood. Mrs. Peterson received a second notice about her flower pots, this time threatening a $100 daily fine. The Johnsons were told their vegetable garden had to be removed entirely. Mr. Williams was informed that his bird feeders were creating a nuisance situation and had to go. I organized a quiet meeting with all the affected neighbors at Tom's house. We sat around his kitchen table sharing our Karen horror stories. "She told me I need to repaint my entire house because the color is not approved," said Jennifer Lopez, who lived on the corner lot. "I just painted it last year." "She wants me to remove my workshop," added Mike Chen. "I have had that building for 8 years. "The worst part is the way she talks to us," Mrs. Peterson said quietly. "Like we are children who cannot be trusted to make our own decisions about our own property." I shared what Jim had discovered about the HOA's lack of legal standing, but I asked everyone to keep that information confidential for now. "I want to give Karen enough rope to hang herself," I explained. "The more illegal action she takes while believing she has authority, the stronger our case becomes." Everyone agreed to continue documenting their interactions with Karen, while I built the legal foundation to stop her permanently. Karen played right into our strategy. She started conducting what she called weekly compliance patrols, driving through the neighborhood with her clipboard and camera. She posted official-looking notices on people's doors when they were not home. She even started calling herself the Neighborhood Standards Enforcement Officer in her correspondence. The turning point came when Karen decided to establish what she called HOA administrative fees for her enforcement activities. She sent letters to everyone in the neighborhood demanding an additional $200 to cover the costs of her compliance efforts. "This fee is mandatory and must be paid within 10 days to avoid penalty charges," her letter stated. When Tom called to tell me about the fee letter, I knew Karen had crossed a line that would have serious consequences. "Jim, Karen is now collecting money under false pretenses," I told my attorney. "She is charging administrative fees for an organization that does not legally exist." "That changes everything," Jim replied. "What she is doing now could constitute fraud. We need to be very careful about how we proceed." "I am tired of being careful," I said. "My pool has been covered for 3 weeks because of her lies. My neighbors are being harassed daily. When do we stop her?" "Soon," Jim promised. "But let me research the fraud statutes first. If we are going to take Karen down, we need to do it right." While Jim prepared the legal strategy, I made one final decision. I was going to give Karen the opportunity to make her biggest mistake yet. I called her and requested a face-to-face meeting to discuss paying the administrative fee. Finally ready to start following the rules, she asked smugly. I just want to understand exactly what authority you have to collect these fees, I replied. I have full authority as HOA president to enforce all covenants and collect necessary fees, she stated confidently. Could you put that in writing for me? I like to have documentation for my records. Of course, she replied. I will have an official statement prepared for our meeting. As I hung up the phone, I realized Karen was about to hand me the final piece of evidence I needed to destroy her credibility completely. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for her to walk into it. Karen and I met at the local coffee shop on Main Street the following Tuesday morning. She arrived with a leather briefcase and an air of official importance that would have been amusing if it had not been causing so much harm to my neighbors. I have prepared the documentation you requested, she said, sliding a typed letter across the table. This clearly outlines my authority as HOA president and the legal basis for all fees and fines. I read the document carefully. It was even more damaging than I had hoped. Karen had put in writing that she had full legal authority granted by county and state regulations to enforce neighborhood covenants, collect fees, and impose penalties for noncompliance. Every single claim in the letter was false, and now I had written proof of her fraudulent statements. This is very thorough, I said, folding the letter and putting it in my pocket. I appreciate the clarification. Now about your administrative fee, she continued. The payment is already overdue, so there will be an additional late penalty of $25. Karen, I need to ask you something directly. Are you absolutely certain you have legal authority to collect these fees? Of course I am certain, she replied impatiently. I would not be collecting them otherwise. And the pool situation. You are confident that you have the authority to force me to keep it closed. Completely confident, she said. In fact, if you try to reopen that pool without proper screening, I will be forced to contact the authorities. That statement sent a chill down my spine. What do you mean by authorities? I mean the police, the county code enforcement, whoever necessary to ensure compliance. I left that meeting knowing that Karen was planning to escalate the situation beyond neighborhood harassment. She was preparing to involve law enforcement in her fraudulent enforcement activities. I called Jim immediately after leaving the coffee shop. She is planning to call the police if I reopen my pool, I told him. We need to move fast. Actually, David, I think we should let her call the police, Jim replied. A false police report would give us criminal charges to pursue, not just civil violations. Are you suggesting I reopen my pool? I am suggesting that if you want to reopen your pool on your own property, you have every legal right to do so. What Karen does in response is her choice. That evening, I made the decision that would change everything. I removed the cover from my pool, turned on the filtration system, and prepared to swim in my own pool for the first time in over a month. The water was crystal clear and perfectly warm. As I floated on my back looking up at the stars, I felt peaceful for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Karen noticed the uncovered pool the next morning during her regular patrol. I watched from my kitchen window as she stopped her car, took pictures, and made an angry phone call from her vehicle. An hour later, 3 police cars pulled into my driveway. I met the officers at my front door, and Karen was right behind them, pointing at my pool and talking rapidly. "Officers, this man has been violating court orders for months," she declared. "He refuses to comply with legally mandated HOA regulations. I have documented evidence of his continued violations." Officer Rodriguez, who appeared to be the senior officer, looked confused. "Ma'am, what court orders are you referring to?" "The HOA enforcement orders," Karen replied confidently. "I have full authority to issue compliance orders, and he has been ignoring them." "Can you show us these court orders?" Officer Rodriguez asked. Karen began shuffling through her briefcase, pulling out her various letters and violation notices. "These are the official compliance orders," she said, handing over her documents. Officer Rodriguez examined the papers carefully. "Ma'am, these appear to be letters from a homeowners association, not court orders." "The HOA has legal authority to issue binding orders," Karen insisted. "This man is in violation of legally binding covenants." That was the moment Karen sealed her fate. She had just claimed to police officers that her HOA letters were legally binding orders, which they were not. She had filed a false police report based on non-existent legal authority. Officer Rodriguez turned to me. "Sir, do you have any court orders requiring you to modify your pool?" "No, officer, I do not. I have never been served with any court orders about my pool or anything else." "Ma'am, I need to see your identification and any documentation proving your legal authority to issue compliance orders," Officer Rodriguez told Karen. Karen's confidence began to waver. "I am the HOA president. I have authority under the neighborhood covenants." "That is not the same as legal authority to issue orders that you are claiming are enforceable by law enforcement," the officer replied. "I need to see documentation of your official capacity." As Karen fumbled through her briefcase looking for documents that did not exist, I realized she had just committed multiple crimes in front of 3 police officers. Filing a false police report, misrepresenting legal authority, claiming non-existent court orders existed. The trap had worked perfectly. What happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. Officer Rodriguez was not just going to dismiss Karen's false report and leave. He was going to investigate it thoroughly. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me to the station to clarify some inconsistencies in your statement," he told Karen. "Making false reports to law enforcement is a serious matter." Karen's face went pale. "This is not a false report. This man is violating HOA regulations." "But you told us he was violating court orders, which you now admit do not exist," Officer Rodriguez replied. "That is a false statement to police." As they led Karen away, Officer Rodriguez handed me his card. "Sir, we may need a statement from you about this situation. It appears there might be broader issues with fraudulent enforcement activities in your neighborhood." The police investigation moved quickly. Within 48 hours, I received a call from Detective Sarah Williams, who had been assigned to examine Karen's activities. "Mr. Thompson, we need to understand the scope of what has been happening in your neighborhood. Can you provide us with documentation of Mrs. Martinez's enforcement activities?" I gave Detective Williams copies of everything I had collected. Every violation notice, every fee demand, every threat letter Karen had sent to neighbors throughout the area. "This is extensive," Detective Williams said, reviewing the documents. "How many homeowners has she contacted?" "At least 15 families that I know of," I replied. "She has collected over $3,000 in what she calls administrative fees." Detective Williams looked up sharply. "She has collected money?" "Yes, Several neighbors paid fees ranging from $50 to $200 because they believed she had legitimate authority. "That changes everything," Detective Williams said. "We are no longer just looking at false police reports. This could be fraud, extortion, and operating without proper business licenses." The investigation expanded rapidly. Detective Williams contacted every homeowner in our neighborhood to document Karen's activities. The county attorney's office got involved to examine potential violations of state regulations governing homeowner associations. Then the state regulatory agencies joined the investigation. I received a call from Janet Morrison, an investigator with the Texas Department of Commerce, which oversees HOA licensing and operations. "Mr. Thompson, we have received your complaint about unauthorized HOA activities. Our preliminary investigation has uncovered serious violations of state law." "What kind of violations?" I asked. "Operating an unlicensed HOA, collecting fees without proper authorization, misrepresenting legal authority, and failing to file required financial disclosures. Each violation carries automatic penalties." "What does that mean in practical terms?" "It means Mrs. Martinez could be facing substantial fines and criminal charges. The penalties for operating an unauthorized HOA start at $10,000 per violation, and we have documented at least 12 separate violations so far." My head was spinning. 12 violations times $10,000. "That is just the starting point," Janet replied. "The penalties increase based on the number of affected parties and the amount of money collected illegally. We are also looking at federal mail fraud charges because she used the Postal Service to send fraudulent compliance orders." As the investigation continued, the scope of penalties kept growing. The state found that Karen had violated regulations governing unlicensed HOA operations, unauthorized fee collection, fraudulent business licensing, misrepresentation of legal authority, false advertising of services, operating without required insurance, failing to file mandatory financial reports, collecting money without proper business permits. Each violation carried penalties ranging from $5,000 to $50,000. The federal mail fraud charges added another layer of potential criminal liability. But the biggest shock came when the investigation revealed that Karen had been conducting similar fraudulent HOA activities in 2 other neighborhoods where she had previously lived. "Mrs. Martinez has a pattern of moving into communities and establishing fake HOA authority," Detective Williams explained. "We found evidence of similar activities in Leander and Round Rock dating back 5 years. The total financial penalties were staggering. State fines alone exceeded $400,000. Federal penalties added another $300,000. Civil restitution to affected homeowners, including damages for harassment and lost property use, pushed the total above $1 million. Then the lawyers got involved. Jim Patterson filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of all affected homeowners, seeking damages for property devaluation, emotional distress, and legal costs. The lawsuit demanded an additional $1.5 million in punitive damages. Karen faces total penalties and damages of approximately $2.5 million, Jim explained. Between criminal fines, civil penalties, restitution, and punitive damages, she will be financially ruined. I sat in stunned silence. What had started as harassment over pool visibility had uncovered a sophisticated fraud operation that had been running for years across multiple communities. Jim, I just wanted to swim in my pool. I never intended to destroy someone's life. David, you did not destroy her life. Karen destroyed her own life by choosing to commit crimes against innocent people. You just made sure she got caught. The $2.5 million figure represented more than money. It represented justice for every homeowner Karen had intimidated, every family she had stressed with fraudulent threats, and every community she had disrupted with her fake authority. Karen had picked the wrong pool to mess with. The legal consequences for Karen came swiftly and decisively. Within 6 weeks of her false police report, she was facing criminal charges in both state and federal court. The state charges included fraud, extortion, filing false police reports, and operating an unlicensed business. The federal charges focused on mail fraud and wire fraud related to her multi-state pattern of fake HOA operations. Karen's attempts to claim ignorance fell apart when investigators found detailed records she had kept of her fraudulent activities. Her own meticulous documentation, which she had thought proved her authority, instead proved her criminal intent. She kept spreadsheets tracking which homeowners had paid fees and which ones still owed money, Detective Williams explained. She had calculated her projected income from expanding the operation to additional neighborhoods. Karen was not just running a small-time harassment scheme. She was operating a calculated fraud business that had generated over $50,000 in illegal fees across multiple communities. The day Karen was formally charged, I decided it was time to officially reopen my pool. But this was not going to be a quiet family celebration. This was going to be a neighborhood party. I sent invitations to every family Karen had harassed. Pool party at the Thompson Ranch, celebrating freedom from fake HOA tyranny. Over 40 neighbors showed up on Saturday afternoon. Mrs. Peterson brought her famous potato salad. The Johnsons brought vegetables from the garden Karen had tried to force them to remove. Mr. Williams hung bird feeders around the pool area in celebration of his victory over Karen's ridiculous restrictions. I have not felt this relaxed in months, Jennifer Lopez told me as she floated in the pool with her children. I was actually losing sleep worrying about having to repaint my house. Tom raised a beer and offered a toast to David for having the courage to fight back when the rest of us were too scared. To Karen, I replied, for being so arrogant that she documented all her own crimes. Everyone laughed and cheered. But the story was not over yet. The investigation into Karen's activities had exposed fundamental problems with HOA oversight throughout the county. The district attorney's office launched a broader investigation into HOA fraud and abuse. 3 other fake HOA operators were discovered and charged with similar crimes. New regulations were passed requiring all HOA boards to register with the county and submit to annual financial audits. Homeowners were given stronger legal protections against fraudulent enforcement activities. Property values in our neighborhood actually increased after Karen's removal. Real estate agents began advertising homes in our area as protected from HOA abuse and certified fraud-free community. The real HOA was eventually re-established with proper legal procedures, but with strict limitations on enforcement activities and mandatory transparency requirements. I was elected to the board to help ensure no future Karens could abuse their neighbors. Karen's house went up for sale 6 months later. She could not afford the legal fees, fines, and restitution payments on her fixed income. The for sale sign in her yard became a symbol of accountability in our neighborhood. I heard through Tom that she moved back to Austin to live with her sister. She was prohibited from serving on any HOA boards as part of her plea agreement, and she faced years of financial monitoring to ensure restitution payments continued. On the one-year anniversary of the pool party, I was floating in my crystal-clear water as the sun set over the Texas hills. Sarah joined me with 2 glasses of wine. "Any regrets about fighting back so hard?" she asked. I thought about it carefully. I regret that it took so long for Karen's victims in other neighborhoods to get justice. I regret that she was allowed to terrorize people for years before someone stopped her. But you do not regret destroying her financially. Karen destroyed herself, I replied. I just made sure she faced consequences for her actions. Every dollar she has to pay represents a family she harassed, a person she intimidated, or a community she damaged. The pool sparkled in the evening light, no longer a symbol of conflict, but a testament to the power of standing up to bullies. My grandchildren were learning to swim in those same waters where their grandfather had learned to fight injustice. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim. Karen thought she could intimidate me into giving up something I had worked 15 years to build. Instead, she lost everything she had tried to take from others. The pool is still there, still visible from the road, still bringing families together every summer. Karen is gone, but the lesson remains. When someone abuses their power, eventually they meet someone who refuses to be abused. Justice is like water, it always finds a way.